how can you be one step ahead of the weather? And how can you be proactive on climate change and operational efficiency? Today, I have with me Bruno Balbi, co-founder of I4C, with me in the studio. Welcome, Bruno.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. So, I know you come from Brazil originally. You actually started living in the Netherlands. And I also know you're a big fan of music and playing a lot of guitar. With all starting up a business and these kind of things, do you still have time to play the guitar?
Yeah, that's actually for me. I'm a Brazilian, but I don't really play soccer really well.
Mm-hmm.
So my Sunday soccer, like weekend soccer, it's the guitar.
It's the guitar. Right.
So yeah, it's what makes me more sane and creative.
Nice. Well, I love to listen to your music, but maybe it's good to share a bit about to the audience about I4C and how you started to go on the journey that you are on now.
No, yeah, absolutely. I started I4C with two co-founders, with Davi and Mateus. We were colleagues in oceanography, the bachelor that we went through, the university in Brazil. And we all share this vision of how can we use like ocean and weather technologies to help businesses be more resilient, especially in the face of climate change. The coastal areas are the most affected and vulnerable to these changes. So we found that the weather and sea forecasts close to shore, specifically for maritime operations, they were really poor in terms of quality. It's like the industry was having the wrong tools to navigate how to tackle climate impact.
Mm-hmm.
So we started I4C with this vision and basically solving two problems, like having the best forecast possible for a very specific location. And second, translating what those forecasts actually means to the daily operations of a port, a terminal, shipping company, or even offshore wind farms. So what are the actual impacts? So the operators and the planners, they are not focusing on understanding and interpreting the weather graphs. They are focused on, okay, what are the triggers to my daily decisions, based, of course, on the weather impacts.
Yeah, and from my perspective, that is really key to have a good understanding of what the risk is that you are actually facing. It's not about the weather, but it's about what is the consequence of that weather, right? That you need to be aware of.
Yeah,
it's a lot about predictions in that sense, and that's also what I recognize in if I really look at the maritime industry. It is really core that you do have a deep understanding of what is happening inside of that industry. For us, what we started to build is like being context aware. Everything is different. Everything, all vessels, all ports, from the weather perspective as well. Things are completely different. We are bundling that kind of information, and that creates a deep understanding of what is happening in the context of the operations that you're doing. But if we talk about, if you talk about sea and weather forecast, what is the thing that you feel like people are missing out the most when running the maritime operations?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because when we think about weather forecasts, I think the first thing that comes to mind, it's the weather apps or the weather websites that you always go when you want to have a barbecue in the weekend. You go to those websites to see the weather forecast. But we always say internally at I4C that it's like a tool belt. So you have different tools for different jobs. And when you see the weather forecasts in the apps or in the public information that you can find online, normally those are forecasts that are very generic for a big area. So basically the pixel of that picture, it's 50 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 10 kilometers. So it's really good to understand general behaviors of the weather in a large area, like a state or even a country. But then if you need to make a decision inside a port terminal in berth 1 for vessel X, how the waves, how the tides, currents, wind will affect that specific operation, then you need a different tool that will give you a more, let's say, accurate depiction of what's happening exactly at that location. So that's where hyperlocal weather forecasting comes into place with a pixel that can go, let's say, from 25 meters, 10 meters, 100 meters. And then you can really have the right resolution to solve the specific problem that you have, especially in maritime operations in the coast. So I think that's the main differentiator. Do you have the right tool to solve the right problem? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the first thing that we always, when we're pitching I4C to customers, to partners, this is the first thing that we need to actually make sure is understanding.
Yeah. So do they really get the idea that they are basing decisions on information which is not sufficiently accurate?
Yes.
That you were saying. And that's one thing that you are bringing to the industry. So the awareness of the hyper-local need of that information. But the other way around, if you think about the industry, what is the thing that you have taken out from the industry that is really a learning from you that you didn't see coming or was completely different than you expected when you started or were on the journey of I4C?
Yeah, I think the main thing that we notice is that all of our customers today, they tell us, like, before we started actually taking into consideration these specific tools, we're really blind of what was actually happening close to shore or inside the port. And when we started working, like back in 2015, 16, we noticed that these big companies, they have global operations, that most of them are basing their decisions regarding to weather on this more generic, with less resolution forecasts. So of course, those forecasts are really useful for the journey. So going from Asia to Europe, like these big legs, but the impact on the ports, on a port level, it's still like not entirely there. So that was the main thing that we noticed when we started, and something that we are learning right now. The more customers we have and the more contact with the operators, the people that are actually making the decisions every day, is that one of the main problems today is that data, specifically for weather and sea, it's very fragmented. So you have a lot of options, a lot of different models, a lot of different providers that are available, most of them publicly. And the question is, okay, I have a lot of data in my hands. Which one should I trust? Which one should I take into consideration when making a decision? So then that problem that we thought was only about the accuracy or how to make sure we have the best forecast. That's also an issue. The quality of the forecast, of course, is key. But there's another layer of understanding within the industry that, okay, there's a lot of data available as well. So which one should be, let's say, considered a single source of truth? And this is a big challenge because, of course, this source of truth is going to be different depending on where you are. So in the Atlantic Ocean is different than the North Sea, that is different from Asia, from South America. So how do you tackle this sea of data, right?
And how do you see that it's going to happen? How do you see that I4C is going to give an answer or provide an answer on that single source of truth? Is that you or is that broader?
Yeah, I mean, our main challenge is not to be a generic solution, but we have a very strict focus. So we focus on the coastal areas, so super close to shore, shallow waters, when we can see the impact of the geography of the shallow waters, of breakwaters, of the port structure. And we only focus on the maritime industry. So, that it's a big puzzle, the whole maritime logistics industry. And we come with a very specific piece of that puzzle to a very specific need of the market. So we take all information that it's available out there, all this fragmented data that it's available, we analyze all of them, and then we put our own, let's say, secret sauce to make sure that the best forecast, the best results are analyzed and delivered to the customer in a very specific location.
So it's basically creating the awareness on there is global visibility that is required, and if you need to have the detailed information on a local scale, which has a use case which requires to have more in-depth knowledge, then or better predictions, then you can zoom into that. I think that zooms in very nicely into the next topic, which is more about what I want to touch upon is transparency and the digital aspects. I think that is what I see. There is more and more data coming. You were already talking about a sea of data, which I like. But the internet, more sensors are being added. Sensors are on the vessels, so the data collection is really becoming one of the big things. How are you using that kind of data, and how is it helping to improve the accuracy that you mentioned in the first part as well? Is this digitalization required? Is this transparency really helping? What are your thoughts on that one?
Okay, I'm going to answer that question into parts. So first of them, it's at I4C, like I said, we focus on having the best toolkit for the right job, for the right industry. So with that said, we use every data that it's available, let's say with the global models. So the big institutions in the world that creates these global models like GFS, ECMWF. In the United States, we have NOAA that produces like these big models. And they're really important for us as an input source to make sure that we have the boundary conditions right to feed into our hyperlocal model. So that's one. Second, with weather forecasting and ocean forecasting, the biggest bottleneck will always be the amount of sensors and measured data, because the ocean is so vast and we don't have enough sensors yet covering the entire ocean, and we need more data, measured data, especially to calibrate the models and have more options to make sure that forecast is better, especially with machine learning, with AI applied to the forecasts.
Yeah, you need to have that feedback loop in place, right?
Yeah, nowadays we do that a lot. That's one of the key ingredients of the forecast that we do. We make sure that we have a hyperlocal forecasting, and then having local sensors measuring tides, wind, wave, all the parameters in real time. We can actually apply machine learning to correct the trajectory of the forecasts. So we have this extra layer of calibration per se. So we, in that sea of data, what we come to do is basically organize that data, analyze that data, use the best data available to feed into our models so we have the best forecasts possible. And the second part of the answer, coming to transparency, I think for any weather forecast provider, we're not selling weather forecasts really. We're selling trust, basically. So they need to trust that the forecast is good in order to take that data into consideration to make a decision. So transparency for us is really important in a way that we always show to our customers in real time and of course over time the actual quality of the forecast. So comparing what's being forecasted to what's being actually measured, making sure that we always calibrate and do the corrections necessary so the forecast keeps improving, but also showing the customer, look, our forecast in average has this amount of errors, and that's within what we are promising that we're going to have, you know?
I think one other big topic on the table, of course, is the climate change. Having those models that you are working, if you look at that, how do you see that climate change is having an impact on the models that you are developing? What does it do to the industry as well? Do you have examples of that?
Yeah. So basically, what climate change is doing in a big picture, we're noticing that extreme weather and sea events, they're happening more regularly and more intensely. So it's not a matter of it's more predictable or less predictable, but we are seeing that these events that really create an impact in the industry, they're not happening every 10 years anymore, every 5 years anymore. And it's likely to keep getting worse over time. So that's the main thing with climate change, that especially for coastal businesses and for the maritime industry as a whole, resilience, I think, is the key word. So how do you stay resilient knowing that these events are happening with more force, more intensely, and happening more often? So what are the actual tools that you're using and investing in to protect you from those events? And of course, making sure that the industry itself is resilient. And when you talk about ports and terminals, you cannot change locations, right?
You can, but it's an expensive move, right?
Yeah, it's really, hard to take a port from one place to the other. So you really need to understand how can I stay resilient in this place for 30, 50, 100 years, knowing that I need to take actions to protect the business itself.
Yeah.
And there are some studies, especially some articles from the World Meteorological Organization, that says that the inaction with climate change in the next 75 years will cost $1.2 trillion for the whole
it's a huge number.
Economy. But it's a huge number, yeah.
And so changes will increase. The severity will increase. Do you have examples already of things that you were able to predict that people didn't see coming, or where actually savings were realized in that sense?
Yeah. I have a couple of examples that it's really, really good. That's why we work for. It's for those examples, right? One of them, in the Port of Santos, we had a very extreme wind event that one of our customers within the Port of Santos, they actually prepared for that event. And of course, they noticed that it was going to be less impactful for them itself. But that day, the port experienced a lot of damages, especially one of the terminals with some cranes that were damaged because of that event itself. So it was really interesting to see that the impact of that extreme event was not for the entire port. It was really focused on some areas of the port, and that's where hyperlocal forecasting comes in. You can actually breathe calmly that, okay, that extreme event is going to happen, but it's going to be less intense in my area. But also can be the other way around. No, I'm in the hot spot of that event, so I need to take some extra precautions. Yeah. And also, a customer that we're working with that has some decisions made on how to speed up or slow down the ship because of the port ahead is being closed or not because of weather conditions. We have examples of ship owners that actually went faster, so they burn more fuel to get to the next port in order to not wait for the port to be open again because of wind restrictions.
And to be safe, I guess.
And to be safe. Yeah. And of course, and also the other example where the ship slowed down to save fuel because by the time it was predicted to arrive in the next port, the port would be closed because of wind and wave conditions. So they actually went there slower, got to the next port a little bit more later, but they didn't wait in Anchorage. So those little, it's not little, but those decisions.
Those examples, yeah.
But they're good examples of how to use the weather, how to be one step ahead of the weather to be more efficient, and ultimately, and of course, that's the main thing, to be more safe.
Yeah, I think that's also where our companies and our technologies are very complementary. You are looking really at the weather and the sea forecasting part. I often say, like, we are kind of a context broker. We are bundling also loads of information, loads of data points from planning perspectives, mapping out processes, having a lot of in-depth knowledge on what is happening in port and how vessels are behaving. So I think bringing those two worlds together, and we've know that we've done the experiments on that part, but it is really interesting to see, like, how to get value out of the data and the insights that you are producing in that part.
And one thing that is really interesting on is that I like to stress that we are solving one piece of the puzzle, right? And one of our customers, also a container terminal, they added the weather intelligence to their berth window capabilities. So they have a suite of solutions to make sure they have the best berth window planning. They were able to add 70 additional ships in 1 year to their lineup.
Significant.
So of course, the weather forecast is one piece of the puzzle, but combining that with more extensive tools to understand how to make sure that the port call is optimized, then it's safer and ultimately more efficient in the end.
Then there is one last topic I would like to discuss with you. I think we have now some examples on how it is being used, but I think the other key point is like change within organizations, starting to use that information in the operational context, and the market being ready to adopt these kind of things. I think they're kind of intertwined in that part. So what are your experiences in this change perspective? How people are the organizations capable of using the information directly? Do you need to train them? What are the things that people need to be aware of? Like, okay, and I've got this prediction, but how can I use it? What is your experience in that?
Well, that's a really interesting question because we started I4C in 2015. So it's been a little bit over 10 years. And what we've noticed, especially in the commercial efforts, like trying to sell the solution, is that the market is demanding better solutions in terms of weather and sea forecast a lot more nowadays than when we started. And I think that's a clear indication that climate change is showing its colossus. So it's being more visible. So the demand is getting higher because the impacts are more pronounced. So it's going to keep, I think it's going to keep, the demand is going to keep getting higher because these events are going to keep getting more strong and more regular.
So in the market part we covered, you covered, they realize that they need to use that information in order to be resilient, to use your words in operations, right?
Yeah, so we're noticing that slowly but steadily, this is getting more important into the big organizations. And on the other hand, change is always hard. And the maritime industry relied on very experienced people that really understand how that environment behaves. So you have people that been an operator for 20 years, 30 years, and they really know how to tackle those challenges. So giving new tools and new processes to the teams that already have their own way of working, it's always a challenge. And what we notice is that it's not fast. So in some companies, that takes a lot of training, takes a lot of getting used to the new tools. So over time, the teams, they start trusting the system more and actually having the ability to really understand and embed that into their daily operations. But if you want to change, let's say, a company that has global operations and has thousands of vessels at sea, then the challenge is a lot bigger. So you really need to make sure that not only the product is trusted by everyone, but everyone is trained to know the limitations of the platform itself. And of course, the normal day-to-day operations that have been used to do for the last 20, 30, 50 years, it's going to take some time to adjust. And of course, maritime, it's a conservative market because it needs to be in a way, because very expensive assets, the safety is a big issue. So I think slowly we're getting there, and it's really beautiful to see, like in 10 years of I4C, how much the industry evolved in that sense. But there's still a lot to do.
And I also have the feeling that the operational efficiency, or the drive towards operational efficiency, both in light of the climate change, but also like it's the essence, it's the nature of the industry to be operational efficient, to be operational excellent, is helping as well in the adoption. People want to get as much value out of the assets. So having better visibility and know that you can use it safely will also help.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
Cool. Bruno, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it to have the chat with you. We have many chats, but thank you and really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Leon. I'm always available.
Thanks.